class this join up a little bit with the carryover champ. Welcome back, the lovely Bronwyn Bishop from the Centre of Independent Studies, the equally lovely Freya Leach. Lovely to see you both. All right, so as I explained, we can see how they want to start the year, both sides of politics right now. You can see the scenario where Peter Dutton's trying to go broad values, also where the majority of the country is, which is that we're on the wrong track. Prime Minister is sort of basically doing what you would do in the middle of the 33 days, which is turning up somewhere with an announcement, hyper-local, hoping that somehow people go, millions of dollars for Davenport. I will now officially completely forget the past 3 years of your government. Here he was in Tasmania trying to shore up the 2 seats that Labor have there.
This grant here of $6 million for the revitalisation of Devonport's CBD by delivering stage 3 of the Living City project is a great example of the Commonwealth backing local communities. This has been developed from the ground up, not something that's been developed in Canberra.
But the bloke from Canberra will turn up to tell you how good he is because he's using his, that's your money to make it happen. So, Bronwyn, obviously we know that you think that the coalition's on the right track at the moment. The bookies seem to suggest it, some parts of the polls seem to suggest it. But what is it about the way the Prime Minister has started that gives you an insight about how he plans to campaign between now and when he calls it?
Desperation's a good word. And if I might say, you know, it reminds me a bit of 2007. Peter Costello and John Howard spent like madmen. And we know how that ended up. The Prime Minister lost his seat. So spending really isn't the answer. If you haven't been delivering and you've been seen to be in error in everything you've done, or a majority of things you've done, spending is not going to buy you forgiveness. And when I watch the sheer duplicity of saying, I'll give money to clean up the Macquarie Harbour to sort of help the salmon industry, but I won't tell Tanya Plibersek that she's got to make a decision and save the industry, not destroy it.
Dare I say, each way elbow of it all. It's like it's baked into the cake. Freya, again, I just think, and I was saying this before, this fired up first show back, which was that I don't want another election of politicians turning up and announcing, you know, small amounts of money, 6 million, of course, in anyone's life, huge, but small amounts of money in terms of the federal budget as a way of just having an excuse to have a press conference. They don't need the announcement to have the press conference, local candidates, all the rest of it, and I get that there's all of these subterranean reasons, apparently, why you make these local announcements, but if all you see is a government where 70+% of people can't name a single thing that they've done to make your life better, but you're turning up saying, here I am with the sack full of goodies. No one believes the goodies, right?
So true. And I think what we've seen with this government now, it's as Bronwyn said, it's complete desperation. And they have no other policy. Like, they have no ideas. There is no economic reform on the table. There is no tax reform. There's no nothing. It's just empty. It's vacuous, like Albo and his entire leadership. But that's what it is. So all they're left with are these micro-election commitments, basically trying to pork barrel the electorate into forgetting 3 years. But I don't think it's going to work because we have had the worst decline in living standards in 50 years. 21 months of consecutive per capita recession. Australians will not forget that. We are being left behind. The worst decline in living standards in the OECD. And now we're caught in this toxic cycle where we've had a government that's spent an extra $347 billion since the election. So that's going to push up inflation. And then they're going to turn around and go, okay, so now we need more cost of living measures. So your taxes are going to be spent more, and that's going to further push up inflation. And that is the cycle that Albo has gotten our country into.
But also it feels, Bronwyn, that again, the political class that is freely giving advice via the Turnbull Times, be more like Nick Xenophon. Okay, that was great for a little while, but then what was it like when he tried to run for Premier more recently? I'm pretty sure that didn't work out in the end. But the idea here that we're in this scenario where I think comfortable people who talk about politics for a living, comfortable people who sort of might sit around and get engaged in the conversation about, oh, are they too conservative? What's their 2035 target? Why haven't they all, the sort of, frankly, the sort of greeny teal world, they're ignoring the reality. And the reality is that if the extreme majority of the population, including in seats that have never voted Liberal, right, they are ignoring the actual threat on the table.
I think John Keogh nailed it in the Fin Review today when he said what people care about is what you pay at the checkout, what you pay for your petrol, what you pay for your electricity, and most importantly, what you pay for your insurance.
Yes.
That is a killer. When you've been going, think of your own accounts. When you've been going through paying your ordinary bills and suddenly you get the whammo of the insurance bill for either your house or for your car or whatever it is, it's a whammo and it goes through the roof. And with these fires in the United States, I'm afraid that's going to impact on that price again because they're part of the international insurance business.
Well, they're literally global companies that the Australian office may help pay for. And,
certainly the reinsurers are.
Yeah.
But the important thing is that those four issues are what determines what disposable income you've got every week.
Yeah.
And worrying about whether or not Albo's going to say, I'm going to put $3 billion more into the NBN or whatever it is, it just doesn't wash. It just doesn't wash.
I mean, also, they've spent $250 billion on government advertising, right? This is where, and look, the former government in its dying days was terrible with this stuff too. I've said it for as long as I've had access to a microphone or a camera. There shouldn't be anything bar emergency government advertising in the calendar year of an election, right? The rest of it is all pretty obvious because it has consistently been abused, all right? Be funny if somebody put that into the parliament and see what happens. I'm a big fan of maybe just, one-line bills going into the parliament to see what happens.
No idea how it is possible in government to define something as essential.
Yes.
For advertising purposes.
Yes.
It really is something, it's quite an art.
Yeah, it is quite strange. But you've got this scenario where there are people who are truly struggling, 3 million people this close to homelessness, right? 3.4 having problems with food insecurity. That number is not the forever number that's always been in Australia, right? That is the number that has been growing over the past couple of years. The census showed us years ago more homeless people than ever before in the country, right? Sorry to be the bleeding heart, but the reality is a country that is doing as well as we are should have a charity sector that at times of surge gets the same surge as other things. Am I wrong here?
No, but I want to talk about a group that is only just starting to be talked about now, that I started talking about when I was Minister for Aged Care. And they are older women,
Yes.
no superannuation
Yes.
and no property,
Yes.
who have nothing.
Yep.
And we're talking about women in their 60s and their 70s who are sleeping rough, and indeed their 80s. I remember talking to one woman who was in her 80s who had no security. She had her head on a pillow by grace and favour of a local charity. And that has become a more pressing issue, and it will continue to grow. Now, once upon a time, under the aged care system, we used to have a system of hostel care, which was very low level, and people literally could live there. They weren't in need of the sort of care that we think of these days. But that disappeared. And the bottom line is nothing has replaced it. And so this is a category of people, along with mothers with children who are fleeing domestic violence
100%.
and live in their cars.
Yeah, 100%.
These people are just slipping through the cracks.
Well, and this is where I'm not going to say political opportunity because it's also the right thing to do, which is that I think that rather than every day a different announcement, a couple of million here, a couple of million there, like make a big commitment in terms of the opposition to surge the charity sector, to take care of these people during these particular times, right? But there are also, again, that group of people who, they're sweet, they don't care, frankly, about what's going on, or they are more concerned by sort of whatever the Radio National talking point of the day is. Freya, you've run in these electorates at certain times. So do you think that, again, there's elections within elections within elections within elections, right? But do you think that we are at a tipping point where some of the places that may have just 3 years ago not really been all that into cost of living stuff that 3 years later are going to really just be, mate, okay, I don't care about your announcement about Davenport. God love Davenport, but I don't care.
Yeah. Well, I think the policies that we see the left run on, especially the last election, climate, integrity, women, the voice, those are luxury issues. Those are things you can care about when you're not worried about putting food on the table, when you're not worried about getting your kids their back to school essentials, paying for fuel, paying for all your expenses. And I think the economy has changed in such a way, real disposable incomes have collapsed, cost of living is continuing to surge, productivity is declining. And so I think now those issues that people in, you know, Balmain, where I ran as a state Liberal candidate, where they had the luxury to care about that 3 years ago, even in those areas where they do have high incomes, they are property owners, they are still feeling the pinch because mortgages are still up, you know, $25,000 a year.
Which is why, and I don't say it in a left-wing, right-wing way, but if that's the way to understand it for the point of the conversation, let's go there, right? I agree with Peter Dutton's announcement on restatement on Sunday, doubling the number of telehealth things when it comes to mental health. I would think that a big sweeping thing around the charity sector helps not soften, but certainly shows what your priorities are. But if Albo's out there each and every day, to me, I just think that you're able to make a big statement and reinforce it constantly as a sign of your priorities, as opposed to announcement a day to justify the press conference, and that's what the press gallery needs because we constantly have to feed the beast.
I think that's right, but also the thing I think that is strong about Peter Dutton, and he's doing extremely well, is on the so-called culture wars. Loving our country, loving the symbols of our country, because at the end of the day, if you do not have a culture, you've got nothing to defend.
Bloody oath.
And if we're really concerned about how Australia is going to survive in a complex world, we have to stick up for who we are, what our culture is, and then have a defence force to defend it.
Bloody oath. I've got some actual stats about this that I'm going to deal with tomorrow night, which is actually going to further put some data behind the idea about why those changes have happened in favour of things like Australia Day, because of the mix of Australia that has changed over the past 10 and 20 years, where, surprise, surprise, the debate about the day that certain people want to have over the past 10, 20 years has been replaced by people who see the day as, of course, the day they became an Australian. Quick